Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy 40 podcast. I am John DeBari with my co-host, Mr. Matt Walker. We were anticipating the return of Andrew Burke, but he's not here. Anyway, today we are looking at the 2020. It's the Fantasy 40 award show for our MVPs, least valuable players, rookies, etc. You'll hear all the categories as we go through, as we like to call them around here, the 40s. So, Walk, how you doing? And you excited for this?
What a beautiful intro. And yes, I was told AB would be here. I wasn't sure which one it was going to be, the touchdown catching Super Bowl winner or our long lost brother in the great Northwest. And turns out neither here, just me and you. So we're going to be playing a little bit of tennis here, back and forth. And yeah, excited that the season's over. We can do our annual 40 awards, but let's dive. Can we talk about that Super Bowl, anything but Super Bowl for a second? That was one of the most boring, uninspiring games I have ever watched in my adult life. And anyone that thinks otherwise, I'm sorry. It's for these defensive aficionados because, yeah, Todd Bowles crafted an amazing script, but I was like doing other things during the Super Bowl, and I can say that's a statement I've never made in my adult life. Good, bad, or indifferent, I've always been glued to the couch. And in this game, I was just like I painted a bathroom during the Super Bowl.
Well, we had talked about it in another in a chat during the week, and I had other things going on. I was at home. My wife was watching it, but I was doing other shit in the house. I didn't start watching until about the 2-minute warning of the first half, and then the halftime show came on, and I freaked out and made her turn the channel because I wasn't going to sit through that nightmare. And then I watched all of the third, and about halfway through the fourth, my kids were acting a little nuts, so I was like, "Yep, that's it, time for bed." So I dipped out. I didn't even see the end. So I didn't care much going in. So it not surprisingly, and we're not alone. Record setting viewership. So nobody was watching. Nobody was watching anyway.
I would think was crazy given like COVID and bar restrictions and, not being able to go to the game. Like I would have thought it would be a record high for viewership in the Super Bowl, and not being like people supposedly not gathering inside. So more people at their own houses watching it. Like I watched it by myself, like first time with a Super Bowl where I didn't watch with anyone else. Like I would thought the numbers were through the roof. The fact that it got the lowest is nuts because there was so much excitement going into this game, right? Mahomes versus Brady. Like what happened?
It happened across all sports. The World Series was one of the worst viewed. The NBA Finals might have been the worst ever. So people just, as much as everybody thought, well, everyone's stuck inside. Not to go down the whole political thing again, but people just don't want. People are watching the game to watch the game and forget about everything that's wrong in the world. And all of these sports leagues have made it their mission to just bring up, oh, hey, you're trying to have fun. Here's something terrible that's going on in the world. And I think people just don't want negativity. You're watching the game to forget that shit in your life sucks. And they do their best to keep reminding you of how shitty things might be in the world. So I think that's a big part of it. I mean, even golf, the fucking Masters was down.
Yeah, and being that was like kind of an off golf season event, I tell you, I was glued. I love the Masters. I watched every single round of it, but that's a astute observation. And you said you didn't see the end of the game. If you watched till halftime, you saw the end of the game because nothing else fucking happened for the remainder of the game. I mean, the Bucks stepped on their throat in the first half, albeit assisted pretty substantially by these referees as they just penalized Kansas City down the field. And Tom Brady was just throwing dagger touchdowns to Gronk and AB. I just said, he brought his boys down to South Beach, to Tampa with him, and he was making damn sure they were involved in the Super Bowl.
And we thought, that was something we had mentioned, going into, especially with Gronk. So I did not capitalize on it. I did have Brown in a couple spots, but I was too chicken shit. I put Brayton there, which I don't think it would have won me any money, but be what it be. But
I had a sneaky feeling that we were going to see at least one Gronk touchdown. I didn't capitalize on it financially either, but it just made too much sense. And then you see those two idiots saying they're going to Disney World together after the Super Bowl, and they're just laughing, yucking it up. it was just how it should have ended. But yes, we're leaving the 2020 season in the rear view with this award show. So we are diving in, and why not start with these rookies? So we're talking top rookie, and I went flop rookie. Now, who was your top rookie, John? And then you can hit me with who you thought laid an egg, fell on their face.
So for me, the best rookie, and I wouldn't be shocked if anybody went with our guy, Justin Herbert, but, quarterbacks are devalued. I went Justin Jefferson. I mean, that guy ended the year wide receiver 6, 88 catches, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns. He was 18th in the league in targets with 125. 7 games, he had double-digit targets. In the first 2 weeks, I think he had something like 6 total. So he came on, and in a year where, camps were weird and rookies had a slow time getting acclimated to the league and to new playbooks and all that shit, having anybody have that good of a season right out of the gate. And it's not like he's the alpha on that team. I mean, they run it a lot. They use Cook in the passing game, and Thielen is still getting his targets and producing. He really blew me out of the water. And I had, going into the year, I had Rager ahead of him, and we had talked about it, before the season started here and chatting too. This year, more than other years, I diversified. So I could have had Rager in like 6 leagues or 5 leagues, I think. And I ended up, Jefferson was right behind him. And just to diversify, I ended up unintentionally with more Jefferson than Rager. And that worked out very nice for me. So I think it's Jefferson by a pretty wide margin for me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we didn't start off with an overlap, because
I know where you're going.
We tend to be very like-minded, so there will be probably a few of these where we land in the same place. And listen, no disrespect to Mr. Jefferson, so he'll be referenced at a later segment from me. Spoiler alert! But I went with James Flames Robinson.
Knew it.
Come on, man! You said that Jefferson put up 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns. Well, James Robinson put up 1,414 total yards and 10 touchdowns. Okay, so sit down, Jefferson. I know you do cool dances and you catch passes and it's sexy, but undrafted rookie James RB7 overall Robinson, who was picked up on everyone's waiver wire, whether redraft or dynasty. He was RB5 in PPR points per game with any running back to start at 14 games because he missed 2 at the end of the season. So top 5 running back off the scrap heap. This dude was Leonard Fournette plus in this Jaguars offense out of nowhere. I loved watching him play. Exciting, 100% the top rookie this year.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going that way, and he was on my short list, and I pivoted to the wide receiver. But you had mentioned the running back 5, so moving on to the worst rookie of the year, if I'm not mistaken, the 5th running back off the board in our rookie drafts, who I liked, a young man by the name of Keyshawn Vaughn, who, just by overvaluing the running back position and scarcity in the draft this year, Vaughn was, I think his ADP was 10th in rookie picks, squeaking into the end of the first round. I got him in a few spots and a couple other places. I missed out on him. Thank God, because he laid quite the egg, and given his age, and, we've talked to Scott Connor on other podcasts, if these older running backs don't hit right out of the gate, their success rate is basically 0. So 26 carries on the year, 109 yards, no touchdowns, 5 catches, 34 yards, did catch 1. 23 0.3 total fantasy points in PPR this year for a first-round pick at running back. Woof! Mr. Keyshawn Vaughn, worst rookie this year.
Hard to argue, John, that he hurt us both personally and professionally. And, I don't know that I'll ever forgive him. But I will tell you as a sidebar, I'm willing to throw, like a late third, early fourth round pick at the Keyshawn Vaughn owner to see what may come of things, because there's no way Leonard Fournette comes back there. He needs to cash his last ticket as far as free agency is concerned. So you've seen they've run 2 running backs and they get 12 to 15 carries a game. I think Ronald Jones and Keyshawn Vaughn are going to be in the backfield next year. So just one man's opinion, but he sure as shit stunk in his rookie season. But I went a little different direction again. So good initial start for us. And just circling it back around one more time to take a shot at this fucking slouch. And it's Henry Ruggs, who put up a sterling wide receiver 89 finish on the season. This first wide receiver taken in a draft class that included your top rookie, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, amongst others. Henry Ruggs was the first wide receiver taken because the Las Vegas, Christ, I went through, are stupid. They just still place Al Davis type emphasis on speed.
It's amazing. You'd think when he was dead it would stop, but no.
They doubled down. They're like, no, let's reach at this point. So Mr. Ruggs turned 43 targets into 26 receptions for 452 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, 202 of those yards and both touchdowns came on 5 catches in 2 games at KC and at the Jets. So he gave you a nice 250 yards and no touchdowns across the rest of the season. He was hot garbage and was the most reliant big play guy outlier in a team that had Nelson Aguilar as their clear-cut wide receiver 1 by the middle of the season. He couldn't overcome the likes of Nelson Aguilar and Hunter Renfrow to command anything more than 43 targets for a team that was in some firefights this year because their defense stinks too. Henry Ruggs stinks. He will forever stink. This is not going to change. We're not going to see the Corey Davis-like ascension, the Devontae Parker.
No.
It's not happening. Henry Ruggs didn't break out for a reason, and it's because he's a one-trick pony.
Yeah. I had him. It's one of the guys I entertained for Bust of the Year a little later on, but yeah, garbage. Garbage.
Not a fan. I own him in one place, and it's because he literally fell to like the mid-second round. In a league I'm in.
Too high for me.
And I'm still upset that it was like back mid second round. And I'm like, I'm probably going to cut him. Yeah. Like I even bought in like shit. This dude was the first wide receiver taken. He's going to get opportunity. Nope. So I let draft capital influence me too much in that one. Lesson learned. Mr. Ruggs pulled the rugs out from under me.
That's a good one. Well, it's a bad one, but that's why it's a good one. Okay, so got the rookies getting in there. Get our juices flowing there nice and early. Now we'll get a little slow it down a bit here. We're looking at some IDP action for a couple picks here. Who was your individual defensive player MVP this year?
Let's see. This one's going to be interesting as well, and I'm not going to tell you why. But my IDP MVP, we just watched him play on Sunday, or watch him play here and there, as neither of us were glued to the TV. But Devin White, 97 tackles, 43 assists, 9 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery. This dude is an absolute animal. He is everything you want in an IDP player. He is a tackle compiler with double-digit sack upside, and he's going to mix in some turnover plays. Oh, you dream of getting a Devin White at your linebacker spot in IDP. Just set it and forget it for 10 years. He's amazing.
I had him initially, and then I thought he was too chalky. So I started digging around some numbers. And obviously everyone's IDP has got different scoring settings and everything. I went with Zach Cunningham. And here's why. Devin White had some huge games, but he also had 2 games where he scored less than 10 fantasy points. He had ended the year with 308 points in the settings. I was looking at second to him was Zach Cunningham, who had 300. Cunningham never had a bad game. He scored 11 points or more in all 16 games, where White had the couple bigger ones and a couple down ones. So to me, that consistency, we talk about this. I talk about this a lot here. Give me the guy that I can count on every single week to get me a nice high floor compared to the guy that's going to give me the few huge weeks. Obviously, I'm not saying Devin White is not good. That guy's a fucking stud. And like I said, only 2 out of 16 games, he scored less than 10, and one was like 7 and 8. So he wasn't putting up, goose eggs being phased out by other teams' offenses. So can't go wrong with either one of them. But for the consistency, I went with Cunningham.
Yeah, and listen, Devin White missed a week too, so he's
correct.
Those totals. Less game, he might have thrown 100 tackle, double-digit sack totals if he had played all. And Cunningham's no slouch. He took a little bit of time to develop, but in that terrible Houston defense, he had a lot of opportunity to make plays. So kudos to him. So, all right, those are our IDP MVPs.
My rookie IDP MVP. Initially, for another LSU running back, my thought was to go with Patrick Queen, but he ended up, again, in my scoring, around linebacker 20. And 222 points, started the year good, but as the Ravens got banged up on the defensive line, they were able to kind of phase him out, getting bigger bodies on him. So he's got to develop a little more. I went with a guy I fucking love and got all over the place last year. Jeremy Chin, safety, Carolina Panthers, 238 points in fantasy. He was safety number 4 on the year. They use him just how you want a guy to get used. He's strong side linebacker sometime, in the box safety. He gets used the way you need a guy to get used to get some massive fantasy points. And I was a huge fan of him coming out. I liked everything I saw from him. To me, it's not even – it was close until I looked at the numbers. But, yeah, Chin is a fucking stud, and I love him. That guy, I'm so glad I have him in several spots.
Yeah, I have very little to add there because Jeremy Chin was my selection as well. And I was screaming for my Eagles to take him in the second round, and they did not. They just thought they could do better, and they took Jalen Hurts instead, and look where that got us. So I'm a big fan.
Controversy.
Yeah, fucking stupid Howie Roseman. So I'm right there with you. Jeremy Chin is amazing, and from an IDP perspective, hard to do better. I mean, I think an honorable mention to stud Chase Young, who only played in 14 games, still racked up 7.5 sacks, 4 passes defense, 4 forced fumbles, and 3 fumble recoveries. Like, that dude is an absolute animal, and that defensive line is something to deal with. But Jeremy Chin, agreed, IDP rookie MVP is our boy Jeremy Chin.
Amazing. So, moving on from the IDP end of things here, looking at the comeback player of the year. So, who was your comeback player of 2020?
All right. I gave the award to someone, but I also had an honorable mention because I couldn't walk away from the podium without speaking about this guy. So, my comeback player of the year, and it hurt me to give this guy the award. I didn't shake his hand afterwards. I just kind of tossed him the award. He looked away. Was David Johnson. And David Johnson, in one less game, scored 38 more fantasy points, which equated to 4.1 more points per game than the year prior, which was good for a running back 21 finish. So he was a low-end RB2. I was screaming this dude was fucking cooked. And knowing he was going to get the volume in Houston still did little to interest me in David Johnson. So while it's not like he set the world on fire, I didn't think he was going to be an RB2. I thought he'd end up getting hurt again. It wasn't pretty how he did it sometimes in that offense. But, kudos to David Johnson and David Johnson owners for squeezing one more top 24 season out of him. So David Johnson was my comeback player of the year.
Who's your honorable mention?
My honorable mention goes to my boy, Jerick McKinnon,
Ah.
who produced 126.2 PPR points on only 114 touches, over 1.1 points per touch. He finished his RB 38. So not high on anyone's list outside the RB3 territory, but he had a few weeks where he was extremely valuable during that 49ers bloodbath of a season. And at the end of the day, he produced similar points per game to Devin Singletary and Latavius Murray. Just didn't touch the ball nearly as much as those gentlemen did. So while I don't think he'll be back in San Fran next year, I think that boat has sailed. It was nice to see McKinnon finally get back on the field and show some of the ability that I was drooling all over when he signed with the 49ers 3 years ago. So we'll give a shout out to the Jet.
My quick honorable mention before I get to my comeback player was Big Ben. Banged up last year, saw a smattering of garbage at quarterback for the Steelers. Comes back this year, was QB 14, which actually, considering what he had to throw to, is surprisingly low. But fringe low end QB1, QB2, could plug him in. Obviously, a high end QB2 option, super flex, but coming back from the injury, I couldn't have asked more than a just outside QB1 finish. My comeback player of the year.
Where you get at it? You know that Big Ben was third in the NFL in pass attempts, and he only played in 15 games. He threw it 608 times. Only Tom Brady and Matt Ryan threw it more. So while this dude had some never before heard of surgery for his elbow for a quarterback, they had him throw it the third most times in the NFL. Probably the most on a per game basis because Brady and Ryan both played 16 games. So yes, Big Ben threw it the most on a per game basis of any quarterback in the NFL last year.
We say it all the time. Volume, baby, volume.
Goodness.
So my comeback player of the year, to the best of my statistical analysis, is the only player who was hurt or injured or didn't play last year and came back to finish top 12 at his position, which means Mr. Rob Gronkowski finished the year as tight end 8. I wrote him off. I traded him in a league for a third-round pick. I'm still happy with that trade. But, yeah, for him to come back and finish as tight end 8, and it wasn't like they featured him. Through attrition, he ends up squeezing into that top 12 there. But to me, yeah, he's the only guy that gave you top 12 production at his position who missed significant time last year. So for me, it was Gronk.
Hard to argue. Gronk had the second fewest targets of any tight end in the top 15. And there was only one tight end in the top 16 that had less receptions than him. So you're right. Was not featured at all. I mean, there was games where he was, what's the opposite of featured? I mean, forgotten. He was just blocking all game. There was games he didn't get there was a game in the playoffs where I don't think he got a target. And then there was one, he got one target. So to have Gronk post a top 8 performance and then put a bow on it with 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl is everything you need to know about the tight end position. That he come back after a year off, not be featured, turn 45 targets into 623, 7 touchdowns, top 8 tight end. Congratulations, Gronk.
What a life.
Yeah. Hard to argue. He played his cards right. So that is a good one right there in Gronk. He did not even come to mind because I usually think injuries when I come back player here, and he just didn't play for the Patriots anymore.
Retired.
Yeah. All right. So now you said you wanted to move on to our personal MVPs and LVPs. Is that correct? Did I get this?
Yes, sir.
Correct. Okay. So jumping around a little bit here, but I'm just going to give both. So
all right.
My MVP was none other than Antonio Gibson. Running back 14. And that was with a 36 for 247 and 0 receiving line. Because he crushed it as a running back, which no one was like, yeah, that's where he's going to make his hay. Even us.
Per game, he was RB1, wasn't he?
Probably, yeah. He missed a few starts, so
Maybe 13, something. He was right up there.
Yeah, I would say probably
with no fucking volume.
No, I mean he played in what did I say? He was 14, so he was 14 games. He had put up 14.7 per game, and I see above him Melvin Gordon 13.8 and Kareem Hunt at 13.7. So yeah, he was running back 12 on a points per game basis, and so he put up RB1 totals, and we were both all over him. And to your point, 170 carries on the year. I mean, only 36 receptions for 247 yards. That shocked the shit out of me. But that offense was just inept. Like, how is J.D. McKissick getting like 8 and 10 catch games? And this beast only has 36 catches on the season.
This is going to turn into an Antonio Gibson show real quick. I wrote something up for him for DLF. And, dude, if his production – his volume just increases slightly and he can be as productive as he was this year. And, we talked about it coming out per touch in college. He was a monster too. So, I mean, he did it in college. He's done it at the pros now on a per touch basis. There's no reason to assume it will not continue at this point. And I'm obviously clearly biased, but he could, if they increase his workload slightly, this guy could be a year in, year out top 5 producer, which is tickles.
Listen, he's not leaving the RB1 conversation anytime soon. And he only had more than 5 targets in a game once.
Yep.
On the season, and it was in week 12. While J.D. McKissick, I'm just going to pivot to this fucking bloodsucker real quick. He had 8 games with 8 or more targets, including back-to-back weeks where he had 14 and 15 targets in weeks 9 and 10. So, Christ almighty, 110 targets, 80 receptions, 589 and 2 touchdowns for J.D. McKissick.
You could keep McKissick involved and give 30 more targets to Gibson.
Yes, yeah.
Think about that.
J.D. McKissick should not see 110 targets in any offense. Definitely not one that has Antonio Gibson in the backfield. But they probably didn't want to overwhelm him, and they needed him to be the primary running back in that offense because he's the bigger body. So hopefully there's some growth in the receiving department because 4.7 yards per carry, 11 rushing TDs on that 170 carries, and he looked damn natural doing it. I fucking love
Me too. And maybe our personal MVP should be Geis for going to fucking jail and opening the door.
Listen, that door is getting kicked down one way or the other by our boy Antonio Gibson. So he was my MVP and my LVP, and this is taking a shot a little bit. I own Lamar Jackson everywhere. I do because he fell in like every draft I was in. He scored the same amount of fantasy points per game as Tom Brady last year. 25.6 fantasy points per game. That's not what you get Lamar Jackson for. Somehow still had 1,000 yards on the ground. Didn't seem like it to me. And disappointed to a QB 10 finish per FF today. And while I didn't expect the repeat of the year prior, I mean, but you tell me he's going to have 1,000 yards rushing and 7 touchdowns on the ground. I'm going to say he should be better than QB 10 because that's just bonus. I mean, he only had 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns a year prior. We're talking 200 yards difference. It wasn't the rushing. It was the regression in the touchdowns, and he fell off almost 400 yards passing. And he was only played 15 games each. I mean, even though the unrealistic TD rate, but just the yardage, that offense just was not in sync early in the year. Was a lot better on the back half of the year from a fantasy production standpoint. But at the beginning of the year, it was painful putting him in a starting lineup when there just did not feel any type of comfort that he was going to give me like the 20-point floor week in and week out. I mean, you just hope for that big run because you sure as shit weren't getting it from him in the passing game.
No, sir.
So he hurt me a lot.
Well, we'll stick with that. I'll go with my least valuable player. I don't like to throw injured guys in here, guys who miss time, but our guy, Kenny Galladay, fucking buried me. I have him in several leagues, got literally nothing out of him. And in a couple spots, I I had him in a bunch of leagues over the last few years since he came into the NFL. Because I had so much, I was able to trade him away in a few spots. And then this was the year I was like, I need more Kenny G in my life. So I traded for him again. So I reacquired him going into this year. So him coming out and not playing really cost me. So I know it's injury related, but Galladay literally buried several of my teams. Even garbage points would have been better than nothing. But at least he was hurt and not out there trotting him out doing nothing. So I knew going into the week he was on my bench, but it killed me because I needed him.
I'm pretty sure he was listed as a strained wallet the entire season because he wasn't hurt. He just refused to play for Detroit without a new contract. So
we've seen it before. He's not the first.
Yeah, pulled up lame. Oh,
at least he didn't retire like half of the other guys.
Yeah. Well, he probably considered it. Yeah, saw Gronk winning Super Bowls down there after pulling the old I retire trick. But yeah, Kenny Galladay hurt. Yeah, my places I did own him, I traded him a lot of those places before today. So he didn't hurt me personally, but as high as we both were on Galladay, I'm sure you have him in a litany of places. So yeah, that's a rough one.
So my personal MVP, though, so you've heard me mention Jeremy Sprinkle's name a bunch because I just liked the tight end in Washington on that Ron Rivera offense. I picked the wrong guy. This is honorable mention. I was able to acquire Logan Thomas either on waivers or via trade after like week 1 or 2, and he finished the year as tight end 3. So he helped me out in a lot of spots where I needed tight end help, so that was good. However, my personal MVP, sticking with on brand here, Aaron Jones. He got A.J. Dillon got drafted by the Packers. People were really worried about what Jones' workload was going to look like. And at the end of the day, he finishes the year as running back 5, coming off that huge year a year ago. People thought he could only go down from there, but he didn't. Running back 5, same as Galladay. I have him in a ton of places, and him having a good year was really carrying several of my fantasy teams. So even though the Packers make me sick with their usage, and when they get Jamal Williams in there, and then they started mixing in Dillon down the stretch, Jones still was RB5, and this guy has top 3 potential if he ever gets a workload. So free agent, hopefully he gets out of Green Bay, which is probably likely. We'll see where he lands and how they're going to use him, but I've been a fan. I tried to move him last year after Dillon got drafted because I was a chicken shit, but now I'm locking him in. He's going to die on all my rosters.
Yeah, he's going to have to because he's 26 years old, going to be 27 next season, probably going to end up elsewhere. But I'm with you. We're pot committed at this point in time, and only could a player of Aaron Jones' caliber put up over 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns in 14 games. And I don't want to say disappoint me. The situation disappointed me because I watched a ridiculous amount of Green Bay plays where there was a 1-yard touchdown throw from Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams. So we could have been talking about another 16 rushing touchdowns.
Oh, yeah.
From Aaron Jones. He had 19 touchdowns overall last year. So the regression was there, but it did not need to be. There was easy opportunity for another 4 to 5 touchdowns, minimal, on Aaron Jones' ledger that ended up going over to the Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams side of things. So I'm with you. I love me some Aaron Jones as well. So we can love him together on the MVP side. It's funny that it was Aaron Jones and Antonio Gibson, 2 of the guys that we were clamoring for in rookie draft season in their respective years. So we don't just talk it. We live it. We draft these guys.
We overcommit.
Yeah, we wring the life out of them.
All right, moving on from our personal most valuable players. Breakout of the year. So we did breakout and bust. Walk, who was your breakout of the 2020 season?
All right. Well, you mentioned this gentleman earlier, and it made for easy segue for me in the top rookie segment because Justin Jefferson broke out. That's a breakout, in my opinion. 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns from the 4th receiver drafted. And right after my Eagles passed on him to take Jalen Reagor, which at the time I was so in favor of. I am still a huge Jalen Reagor fan, but man, Justin Jefferson would have cured a lot of ills in my Eagles offense last year. He showed me things I did not see on tape, and that's, clearly we're limited in what we know and what we see, but I just saw a hyper-efficient slot receiver in Justin Jefferson, and I worried if that's where he would be pigeonholed in the NFL. And no, he was winning on the outside once he got bequeathed that wide receiver 2 designation opposite Adam Thielen, and exceeded my expectations. 88, 1,407, as you said. Justin Jefferson broke out as a rookie, broke Randy Moss's rookie receiving record for those Minnesota Vikings at the same time. So super impressive. Can't begrudge Justin Jefferson, and looks like just a dynasty asset. Going forward, that he's going to get volume. He's going to be a 100-catch guy. As early as next season, he's scoring touchdowns. 1,400 yards doesn't happen by accident. 7 touchdown floor. There's no reason he can't be a 100, 1,510 guy almost annually. And it's frustrating because, unlike you, not diversify a lot. In my dynasties, I have more Jalen Reagor than I do Justin Jefferson. And the one place that I had Justin Jefferson, I flipped him.
For who?
I traded for a 2021 first and Laviska Shenault. And I'm still high on Shenault.
Depends what you get with it. 2021 first. But
I ended up moving that first in season for Julio Jones in a playoff. So not looking too good for that old roster. I cashed those chips, and I would much rather have Justin Jefferson than old ass Julio Jones. I'd rather have that JJ than that JJ. And even Laviska Shenault, even though I think brighter days are ahead for Visca. But yeah, I trusted my analysis, and I took best player available / guy I thought had the most value, and I moved him right there on draft night. So that one didn't work out. It wasn't as good as me flipping on for Brandon Ayuk and AJ Dillon in another league. So you win some, you lose some, John. But Justin Jefferson, legit.
So I had 2. I had a hard time picking in between. Initially, I went with Myles Gaskin. End of the year, running back 28. Per game basis, PPR, he was an RB1?
Yeah, he was good.
Running back 11. He's undersized. He's probably going to get banged up every year. So I don't know if you're going to be able to count on him week in and week out. But if he's on the field, he's a plug-and-play, pretty steady RB2, unless anything really changes there in Miami. But they really seem to like him. And even when Ahmed played while he was out, and Ahmed looked good, did not lose his job to injury, even though Ahmed looked great. Gaskin came back at the end of the year and was carrying the bulk of the work. However, the guy I ended up going with, not off the radar guy. He's had good seasons in the past, but not like we saw. And I have not been a fan of his until now. Too inconsistent for me. But Stephon Diggs, 2 years ago, I believe he was wide receiver 10. Last year, wide receiver 24. Then this year, he lands in Buffalo, and people are like, oh, Josh Allen, if he's miserable with Cousins, wait till he sees this. Well, Allen got his shit together and peppered Diggs with targets. 328 fantasy points, 20.5 a game, wide receiver 3. I mean, that's a breakout. That guy had a monster year, and all the same pieces are in place on offense. They kept their OC. Daboll was supposed to go elsewhere as a head coach, did not. So I think another year of similar production is coming up. So he had a huge year. I don't think a lot of people expected it. Diggs is my breakout of the year.
Yeah, 2 sidebars on that. One, I'm with you on both. Myles Gaskin, he was a late round dart throw of mine in the 2019 draft, and it seemed like a disproportionate leagues I drafted him in only have 1 year taxi. So I ended up cutting him because he didn't do shit after his first year. So I'd really like to have been sitting on him on a 2-year taxi because I did like the player coming out of Washington. And he is undersized, but 5'9", 205. He's short, but he's not slim. He's not one of these 190 guys. So I think he can be the guy. He did absorb some injuries this past season, and he got hit with COVID as well. So that Yeah, he wasn't able to shake loose on that. I do think Miami addresses the running back position this offseason, though, with potentially like a Najee Harris type addition.
And that's kind of where I pivoted to Diggs. I don't know what kind of staying power Gaskin is going to have there.
Yeah, and secondarily, I love me some Stephon Diggs. So it was nice seeing him get into a place where he's the clear-cut alpha in that offense and treated like it with the target volume. And that's not changing anytime soon with that reckless gunslinger Josh Allen cocking it and throwing it downfield. Yeah. Dable staying there is certainly going to help. The Buffalo Bills need to do some work on their defense because Sean McDermott, a defensive mind, has let that defense kind of fade a little bit as they've become more offensively focused, and that is where they're a little light. They have a shit pass rush, and they have a decent secondary. So total sidebars on both of those, but total spot on as far as those breakouts from a bust perspective.
Yeah, let me jump in because I had this was actually difficult for me because a lot of guys. No one jumped to the head of the pack, but several guys' names popped in my head. You mentioned Julio, again, injuries, but 51 catches, 770 yards, 3 scores, no thank you. Ruggs, you had mentioned earlier, being a pile of garbage. Somebody who I just wrote down, but nobody had expectations, so being the bust of the year, not really. But how bad's N'Keal Harry? 33, 309, and 2, and he played every game, if I'm not mistaken. That guy, one of the biggest dynasty busts the last few years, I'd say. But I went with an injured guy, but still just based on where he was drafted and what people were hoping for. I think he only played 6 games. But to me, Joe Mixon was a bust. 99 points on the year. People were taking him 8th overall in drafts. It's just not what people wanted to get out of him. I get he was hurt. I get Gio played well while he was gone, but for me, it was Mixon, and like I said, this was kind of humming and hawing. A lot of guys stood out as underperforming this year, but I just went with Mixon.
N'Keal Harry, what a bum! Right when he got drafted by the Patriots, everyone should have just removed him from their draft boards because, if for nothing else, the Patriots are the worst team in the history of the NFL at targeting wide receiver talent in the draft. They just don't do it. Yeah. I mean, this dude, he hasn't had any favors done for him either with that offense. But, yeah, he stinks. But
got outplayed by
I'm right there with you on
Bird and fucking Jacoby Myers.
Big time, And, you're taking a shot at my boy Joe Mixon on the back end of that. I do not take kindly to the Joe Mixon slander. What did you want Joe Mixon to do in 6 games? I mean, he had his second highest points per game of his career in those 6 games. He just got hurt. First significant injury of his career. He's 16 games his first 3 years. Listen, disappointment, sure. I'm not going to let you say he was a bust, John. Like, he was hurt.
Like I said, I had a hard time with this one.
Joe Mixon's amazing. I'm still here for all the Mixon. I moved my late 2021 first and Todd Gurley for Joe Mixon in a league, and I'm going to win that league this year. It's on the strength of that trade alone because Joe Mixon plus Barrow plus hopefully Penei Sewell in that offense with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Whew! Fire it up. Joe Mixon is going to register a top 5 running back season in 2021. But that's just me and who I stand for. So my bus, you said they were hard. Mine were easy. Take a shot at James Conner, running back 27. James Conner stinks. He's volume dependent bum. And he couldn't even put together a RB2 season battling the likes of Benny the Snail and Booger McFarland's kid. I think like it's embarrassing at this point in time for James Conner. So bust James Conner, but my winner was Rod Burley. Yes, that's running back 29. Life comes at you fast. Todd Gurley had 4 2-touchdown games in 2020 and still could not post an RB2 finish. That is a statistical anomaly. That's impossible, John. You just can't do that. He had nothing really fighting him in that backfield. Brian Hill and Ito Smith, and still ceded carries to both of them. And the other guy whose name has escaped me, that big bruising back that they fed way too many carries to as well. But Gurley signed a 1-year deal to go to Atlanta. I thought they were just going to beat the brakes off him. And they did a little bit, but then second half of the season disappeared. Just poof. And Todd Gurley ceases to exist. So he busted, and now he's dead. So that's what happens when 3 years ago Todd Gurley was the consensus running back 1 startup pick. Just now he's going to be a veteran backup on a 1-year minimum deal, probably trying to chase the ring like a LaShawn McCoy type.
I'll go to Tampa. He could fill that fucking Leonard Fournette vacated role.
Listen, I wouldn't put it past him to say, sure, I made a buttload of money in my career. I'll take the veteran minimum 1-year deal to split the load with Ronald Jones in a Tom Brady offense. But sad is what it is, John.
It be what it be. That's what happens.
Right.
Moving on from busts, we're going to go to the top fantasy playoff performer. So who in the fantasy playoffs week 14 through 16 or 17, if you're in one of those crazy leagues, who was your top fantasy playoff performer for the 2020 season?
I will never play in a fantasy league that goes into week 17. So that only exists in the real NFL. Does not exist in my fantasy world. And 2 names came to mind, one of which I will never speak glowingly about. So it was
probably my guy. I know where this is going.
Process of elimination. My playoff fantasy performer was none other than Jonathan Taylor, who in week 14 was running back 2. In week 15 was running back 15, and in week 16 was running back 10. Just consistency. His worst finish was a top 15 running back in the fantasy playoffs. 2 RB1 finishes, almost the RB1 overall in week 14. Derrick Henry had a little stretch, but he fell out and just laid you an egg in week 16, the most important week. So just that consistency, week in and week out from Jonathan Taylor, when he finally got that bell cow work. It was impressive. I wish it happened a little earlier in the year, but this was a strange year. Jonathan Taylor finished strong, and I'm excited to see what this man is going to do with the bulk of the work, whoever the quarterback is for these Colts in 2021.
So we talked about this guy quite a bit when we were previewing fantasy playoff season and stuff. Given your reaction of someone you'll never speak glowingly about, I'm assuming that's who I picked. Mr. David Montgomery. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
yeah. And we knew this going in. The Bears just had an amazing fluky schedule going into the playoffs. It was great for running backs. It was great for offenses. The Bears had everything lined up perfectly. Weeks 14 through 16, 354 yards on the ground, 4 scores, 6 receptions, another 84 yards through the air. Average 24.6 points per game. If you include week 17, scored another touchdown, had a ton of receptions in that week 17 game, 147 in the air. Averaged 25.5 points per game, including week 17, which was more than Alvin Kamara averaged on the season. So he gave you Alvin Kamara level production in the fantasy playoffs. So can't ask for more than that from a guy, especially where you drafted him. To me, it was kind of a no-brainer, and we knew it going in based on scheduling-wise. If they could just play down, if you want to word it like that, down to the level of their competition in the fantasy playoffs. The Bears got lucky.
Yeah, listen, those 2 guys at the end of the season, Dave Montgomery was RB4 in PPR, and Jonathan Taylor was RB6. So a lot of it was on the strength of how they closed the season. But yeah, just to continue my not speaking well of David Montgomery, he had just over 1,000 yards, 1,070 yards. Aaron Jones, who was running back 5 on the season, had 1,104 yards. So he had, 34 more yards on 46 less carries. Dave Montgomery still he's just volume driven bum at the end of the day. That it was all because of the Tariq Cohen injury that this season happened. If you own David Montgomery in fantasy, you better sell him yesterday. Don't try and squeeze one more year like we do Aaron Jones, and he ends up dying on your roster because it ain't coming. Tariq Cohen's going to be back. David Montgomery's role as a pass catcher is going to diminish. And if he keeps being an average rusher like he has been, 247 carries, 1,070 yards, he's not long, for the league. So if you're pleased with 4.3 yards per carry, at the end of the day, it was a nice uptick from his shitty rookie season, but still not here for David Montgomery. This will be an anomaly outlier season for him. So.
Moving on from the Montgomery trashing, most valuable player and least valuable player, as we are, if nothing else, a completely hater-filled podcast. We're going to close with least valuable, if I'm not mistaken. So MVP, fantasy MVP, for me, I went with Alvin Kamara, 377.8 fantasy points, more than 25 points per game. 15 rushing scores, 5 receiving scores, 21 total touchdowns. Number 2 was Dalvin Cook, who scored 337 points. So he scored 40 more than the second running back. Everything lined up great. It's not a shocker, especially with the injuries at wide receiver. He got more involved in the passing game, but he had a fucking monster year. And I got to think teams with Kamara had a pretty good season.
Yeah, he was definitely in contention for me as well. So I don't want to begrudge him. He only had one game with less than 10 PPR points, but he also put up 56.2 points in championship week 16. So let's not forget that 55-yard 6-touchdown drop that he put on those Minnesota Vikings to win every Alvin Kamara in a championship if they made it to week 16. So hard to go against Alvin Kamara, but I did. And I went with King Devontae Adams, who played 14 games this season, and his per game average was 10.6 targets, 8.2 receptions, 98.1 yards, and 1.3 touchdowns, 25.7 PPR points per game. This guy was just a magnet for Aaron Rodgers' targets. I mean, 149 targets. He was, let me just do this sort real quick. He was 4th in the NFL in targets. The 3 people above him all played 16 games. I mean, just an insane volume and just clear affection for Devontae Adams from Aaron Rodgers, and those 18 touchdowns again. He made a living just getting these short yardage touchdowns at the end of the day. They were just running these like speed options going back and forth across the formation until he was open, and a quick snap throw to Devontae Adams. He walks into the end zone. I mean, it's very creative from a play calling perspective. Devontae Adams owners love him. Again, I referenced it earlier. Aaron Jones owners hate him, but it's hard to begrudge a 1,347-yard, 18-touchdown, 14-game season from Devontae Adams. I mean, just amazing. So I think he earned on a per-game basis that MVP award.
Yeah, he was my second option.
Yeah, so I just flipped. I mean, mine would have been Alvin Kamara. He was amazing in his season, and he did a lot of it without Drew Brees, which was all the more amazing.
I ended up just going with Kamara due to the scarcity at running back, where there was a lot of depth at wide receiver. So I thought the gap between him and picking somebody off waivers was fucking way bigger than Adams and the guy that emerges halfway through the year. But
yeah, I'm right there with you.
They're win-wins. Can't go wrong.
Yeah, right there with you. So let's finish strong, John. LVP. And listen, I'm going to go first because I'm hoping and praying you land this plane on the LVP as you are wont to do. And mine was Ezekiel Elliott. And I said of running backs that played at least 10 games last year, Zeke was running back 13 in a PPR points per game basis. I've been pounding the table for the last year plus to sell Zeke. And I said, now the walls are crumbling down in Big D along with his price tag. So you might be getting Dak back next year, but you ain't getting that O-line back. So he's going to fix some things, probably largely for those pass catchers, but that dominant offensive line that Zeke has run behind for his entire career is gone, and it ain't coming back ever. So You better hope as a Zeke owner that he comes out of the gates hot next year. And again, PSA, sell his ass. Okay? Because it's time to move on. He has only suffered a few minor injuries in his career. And with his running style and workload, the wheels are going to fall off soon for Zeke. So he was another guy that was being talked about as the RB1 in seasonal drafts last year. I mean, it was Saquon, CMC, does he repeat, Alvin Kamara, and Ezekiel Elliott with a guaranteed workload. So to not even finish as an RB1 for him, and it was, he played so put a 10-game threshold on it, that is a least valuable player, in my opinion.
That's very fair. I don't think anybody would disagree. And we like Pollard, and Pollard looked good when he got to play in there. So maybe we'll see a little more Pollard. I thought we would last year. I was surprised we didn't. So don't disagree with anything there.
Tony Pollard was running back 41 on the season and barely touched the ball. So
yeah. So my least valuable player, again, I tried to stay away from guys that were hurt. However, several people, I just couldn't make it happen. Michael Thomas seemed like he missed the entire season. He played in 7 games, so he played in more than half of the team's games. Last year, Michael Thomas, all-world wide receiver. This guy's one of the greatest receivers of all time. 374 fantasy points. Number 2 last year was 276. He almost scored 100 fucking points more than the number 2 wide receiver. And a big part of that in PPR was his 149 catches, if I remember correctly what it was. So coming into this year, the hype train is in full steam ahead. Granted, Breeze got hurt too. This fucking bum comes out, 40 games, 438 yards, and never got in the end zone. Even if you just say he played half a season, he was on pace for 80 and roughly, 870? Holy shit. I mean, he was a number 1 pick in some drafts. In redraft, it isn't crazy. And in Dynasty, he was definitely a first-round pick and could have been first overall in certain leagues. 83 fantasy points. You got games out of him. You got to play him half the season. So this guy, I mean, he killed people. He killed people this year. The only good thing is if he can bounce back and be anything next year, he sucked so bad that you're probably drafting early so you can pair one of your early picks with him going forward in the next few years. But he fucking sucked and killed teams. Like I said, when I saw he played 7, he was off the radar for me because I thought, what did he play, 3 games? I couldn't believe he did that in 7 games. He was horrific.
Yeah, no argument for me. I mean, 12 fantasy points per game, like you said, did not score a touchdown, but the pace he was on, it was unsustainable to begin with. But I mean, only missed 1 game his rookie season, played 16 games the last 3 seasons. But, just ring this stat line. 2017, 104 catches, 1,245 yards, 5 touchdowns. 2018, 147 catches, 1,405 yards, 9 touchdowns. 2019, I'm sorry, I was wrong there. Let me start this again. 2017, 104 catches, 1,245 yards, 5 touchdowns. 2018, 125 catches, 1,405 yards, 9 touchdowns. 2019, 149 catches, 1,725 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Just climbing that hill to that wide receiver 1 pedestal, and then the legs just get shot down from under Slant Boy when he's getting punched in the face by Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, suspended by Sean Payton. Drew Brees' arm falls off. House of Cards comes collapsing down. Michael Thomas comes out at the end of the season saying he never should have even played at the end of the year. He just wanted to gut it out for his boy, and now he has to get like a bunch of surgeries himself, including for that high ankle sprain where he needs to get some, I forget what the hell it's called, like some seatbelt surgery or some shit where it's like they gotta like tie the shit back in, like it's still too loose. But now at the end of the day, he looked every bit an injured wide receiver against those Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where I don't even know if he got a target in that game. But interesting, what does New Orleans do? It's not Drew Brees. He's done, right? I don't care even if he doesn't retire. They shouldn't let him come back next year. Brees is cooked. So it's Is it Taysom Hill? It shouldn't be. I'm sorry. It is just that was.
No, I think it's Winston.
Yeah, that was all well and good. It should be Winston. I even read reports that they intentionally started Taysom Hill to suppress Jameis Winston's value to try and re-sign him.
I believe it.
Going into next season because Sean Payne's like I can squeeze out three wins with Taysom Hill, and that's exactly what he did. Went 3-1 with Taysom Hill while Breeze was out, and then probably should have kept Taysom Hill in there when Breeze came back because that was an ugly finish to a historic Hall of Fame career for Drew Brees, who just looked every bit the 40-plus-year-old quarterback in those final few weeks.
And I like, if it is Winston, I don't mind Thomas going forward. I mean, is it going to be what we saw with Breeze? I doubt it. But like we've seen in the past with Winston playing with Evans, he don't mind firing them YOLO balls down there. And Thomas is obviously a good, steady possession type receiver, but he's also a good big play guy too. So I kind of like the upside to put up kind of Mike Evans-y stats with Winston at quarterback, not to just give the shittiest, cheapest comparison in history, but I don't mind him going forward. But yeah, just
listen, that 80% catch rate is not going to persist for Slant Boy if Jameis is the quarterback. And I see more of a Chris Godwin type existence for Michael Thomas,
which is fine. He was the wide receiver 2 to his wide receiver 1 last year, so nothing wrong with that.
They just got to have someone else in there. Emmanuel Sanders, I believe, is on a 1-year deal. Traquan Smith, maybe. I mean, Traquan Smith could be a thing. He could be that deep threat with Jameis Winston, play that Mike Evans type role. Michael Thomas just be the one eating underneath. Get some Adam Troutman in our lives after they let Jared Cook go. But they still need some work to do with their receivers. I mean, Marquez Callaway, Juwan Johnson, Little Jordan Humphreys, Deontay Harris was a thing this past year for them. That should never be the case. They need to do better at the wide receivers behind Michael Thomas and not just be putting Band-Aids on it. But I'm with you. He was a disappointment on and off the field last season. He was more of a, no pun intended, a punchline than he was, the wide receiver 1 that we had come to expect over the 2 previous years. But yeah, that was disappointing. 12 points per game is disappointing when his previous low was 16.2 in his second year. He was over 20 points per game the last 2 years. Yeah. That's not what you sign up for. That's the dude. I took him as in the first round of the only redraft I still do. He was sitting there late first round. I took him. I got Miles Sanders coming back. I was like, I just won this league. Fuck, I didn't win the league. Like the ball on me, and Miles Sanders was anything but consistent. That was also the same league. I took Leonard Fournette in the 4th round. So, look what happens when you think value's falling. Yeah, sometimes it just plummets, and he was definitely a bust. So I'm right there with you on Michael Thomas. Hopefully, you get your head.
One of the orphans I took over last year was another one of those huge, 32 team, 2 copies of each player, and wide receiver was super thin. And I had the first pick in the dispersal, and Thomas was there, and I was able to get him with the first overall pick. Oh, was I thrilled? I was like, playoffs already. And that fucking guy stunk.
Hey, it reminds me of the league where I took Andrew Luck first overall mere months before he retired on me. Yeah, that was in a Superflex league. But there was one more stat I had here, and it was just something that kind of stood out to me while I was looking through some of this. And it was these Pittsburgh wide receivers. And from a PPR finish, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool all finished between wide receivers 16 and 22. So they were all wide receiver 2s last year, and they all averaged between 13.6 and 14.9 points per game at the end of the day. Deontay Johnson, if he played all the games, he would have been the top guy, but Juju was 16, which blew my mind. Deontay Johnson was 21 because he missed a game, and then Claypool was 22. Just how clustered they were. I have Juju in a number of spots, and he was an epic disappointment. I mean, I could have had him as the boss, but listen, the dude was almost a wide receiver 1. At the end of the day, but it was just so clustered, his production. And you tell me he had 9 touchdowns and 97 catches, I'd be like, you're a liar. And he did. He almost had 100 catches, and he had 9 touchdowns. He just had no yardage. I mean, 831 yards on those 97 catches. He was like running. There was games where he averaged like 6 yards a catch. It was ugly.
Interesting group, and it was hard to trust anybody week in and week out. I mean, Claypool had 2 or 3 just fucking monster games, and that carried him along for most of the year. If Johnson doesn't have a couple, horrific drops throughout the year where the Steelers end up benching him during the game, his numbers are way higher. And in between all of that, like you said, Juju somehow off the radar, steadily plugging away. At the end of the year, you're like, shit, I can't believe he had that good of a season. It was a interesting year statistically for all of them. I mean, I think Juju's out of there this year, so we'll see what happens with just Claypool and Johnson. But I was trying to get Johnson during the year for like a second, and nobody was budging. So I'm going to have to pay quite a bit, I think, if you're looking to get him.
Here's a 3-game Juju stretch just to close this out. It's weeks 11 through 13, where he had 5 targets, 4 for 19 receiving, 4.8 yards per reception. Next week, week 12, 9 targets, 8 for 37, 4.6 yards per reception. Week 13, 10 targets, 7 catches, 28 yards, 4 yards per reception. A 3-week stretch where he saw 24 targets and never averaged above 5 yards of reception.
Beautiful thing.
These are running back totals here, John.
Yeah, James White.
That backup running back had 4 for 19 in the game. Yeah, that makes sense. Strong 4.8 yards per carry.
James White.
I mean, just insanity from those guys. So that is the 40 Awards 2020 NFL season. Now we are just going to totally erase the 2021 COVID NFL season from our memory, and we are going to dive full steam into 2021 with these rookies, with redrafts, with dynasty. We're going to have guests. We are going to blow it out in the coming weeks and months as we get into the warmer weather, at least on this side of the country where I'm still looking at snow. John, I know you saw some snow in Las Vegas recently and weren't too pleased with it yourself, but brighter days are ahead for us and for the fantasy football schedule. John, you agree?
Yeah, this is for Dynasty. This is always, I think most people, this is the best time of the year, starting to get the rookies in, get ready for these rookie drafts. Rookie draft season, to me, is the best part of fantasy football. So looking forward to that.
100%. And this is also where we shine, Jonathan, in uncovering these gems, much like the Antonio Gibson and the Aaron Jones that we discussed. This year will be no different as we do the homework for you to hit these home runs in your rookie draft. So be on the lookout for future episodes of the Fantasy 40. Get us out of here, John.
For myself, John DeVary, for my co-host, Mr. Matt Walker, for the missing in action, supposed to be here, Miss the Award Show, Andrew Burke. We are the Fantasy 40, and we are out of here. Ow! Boom!
I just called it the 40 Awards.
Okay. I'm going to fucking... Whatever I call it, it's going to be fucked up.
That's what we want.
All right. Guess I'm ready. Where's Burke? I was told Burke would be here.
He's just lurking in the YouTube mentions.
Okay. Oh, and I couldn't get the stats off that fantasy football today, so I just used...
How couldn't you get the stats? It's a fucking website where there's a tab for stats.
It was just coming up. It just said Saints running back. I couldn't get any actual. So we had like the Saints fantasy totals. I couldn't find any actual players at all anywhere.
What is wrong with you?
Lots of potential answers to that question. Yeah, and I was doing it was fucking middle of the night for you. So I was like, well, Walk's not even going to be awake. Yeah. So I just went to, and I couldn't. I was having trouble with Fantasy Pros. That wasn't opening up, so I just used ESPN's PPR rankings.
Yeah. The only reason I like this is it gives you like fantasy total points and it gives you points per game, like reference. So it just standardized it for me.
I'll pull it up. If I can find a screenshot of the shit I was dealing with, I'll send it to you. Okay, ready?
Yeah. All right. So we have someone coming to fix a couch that my kids broke that we just bought. And, of course, they show up right at this moment. So,
Can you fix a fucking couch? What do they do?
they sent the furniture doctor.
Jesus fuck.
So, right. I'm going to say yes. They believe that they can.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah, so I had to let the guy in. So he was calling my phone. And I thought the wife was downstairs. But, okay, let's timestamp this puppy. 43 minutes, and we're diving into the breakouts.